Hi, it's me, Ingrid P. And I'm being blessed by the light. I moved my chair around to see if I could get the last rays of sunlight. It's 8 in the evening and the sun is still high up in the sky. That's the beauty of June in Sweden. I wanted to talk about why people don't go to therapy and why it's important to not be too adamant on forcing people into going into therapy. Okay. Right now we live in a world that is pretty therapized, like a lot of focus in culture. I mean, after the pandemic and all that has been a lot about self-care and going to therapy and going through your trauma and self-discovery, all of this kind of stuff. And while in the past it used to be like, anti-mental health and all that, I think that now we're a little bit too much into thinking that therapy is a magical cure, and also we are forcing people to go to therapy, or like not taking people seriously if they don't go to therapy, all that kind of stuff. When the story is much more complex than that. There are many reasons that people choose not to go to therapy or feel like they are not ready to go to therapy. And the first is money, right? It costs money to go to a therapist. Especially if you're going to a physical therapist, which is, in my view, more valuable to me than another kind of therapy. Then there is the availability of therapists that are good at the certain problems that you have. For example, there isn't really an autism, like a therapist in my town that knows about autism, except at the neuro rehab, which I'm not allowed to go to because I don't have a diagnosis yet. That kind of thing. There is also the fact that you might not be ready to go into all of that deep trauma and go to therapy, and that's fine too. Sometimes it's not the right time, and sometimes it's not something that you really want to do at this stage of your life, but you maybe want to do it at some other stage of your life. Then there is also the fact, the fourth reason is because you have had bad experiences in therapy and you've met therapists that maybe weren't nice or that weren't good, that did not fit you, and it's really hard to find an actual therapist that is a good fit for you. And sometimes you need to shop around for therapists. And if you're in an area that doesn't have a lot of therapists, then you're out of luck, You might need to go far away to see a therapist. That kind of goes into the finding the right therapist. And number 5 is also that a lot of people don't want to do something just because somebody else has told them to do so. And I'm one of those people. If somebody tells me that I need to go to therapy, then I will not do it, I will get angry at that person, and I'll try to breathe and think, okay, they just want to help, but it does piss me off, because I don't like receiving that sort of advice. And it might be good advice, but I think that you shouldn't go to therapy just because you feel pressured to go into it, because that will not lead to that great therapy, If you're going to therapy to fix your relationship with somebody else, sure, you can go to therapy to fix your relationship with somebody else, but not because somebody else told you to. It's more because you want to better yourself. It's in the process become better at dealing with relationships, but not because it's inherently fixing the relationship. It's not that your partner or your family member says that they will not be friends with you or they won't love you as much if you don't go to therapy. Then it's kind of like a coercive kind of situation. I do understand that family members or partners or friends might need to set boundaries if they feel like somebody like you are being toxic, but I don't think that they should put it as an ultimatum that you need to go to therapy or else we cannot stay friends. That's not really the way to go, And therapy does not fix all problems. Sometimes therapy is just about talking. And sometimes it is an actual therapy form, but maybe that therapy form needs to be really well individualized to you. And sometimes there isn't really a therapy form that will work for you. Sometimes no therapy forms will work. And also, I find that sometimes people think that you speak a certain way to therapists that is inherently different from speaking to a best friend. And also people find that, you should be able to tell your therapist more things than you should tell your close partner or your best friend. Sometimes you can't say certain things to your therapist, okay? And that's okay. And sometimes you don't go as deep into things with a therapist as you would go with a best friend. And that doesn't mean that you're using your best friend as a therapist. It's rather that, for example, if you're going to a therapist because of a phobia of spiders or something, then you don't need to go through your whole life story in order to deal with your fear of spiders. That is a pretty specific thing. Well, with your friends, maybe you wouldn't talk so much about your fear of spiders because spiders don't come up in your daily conversations all the time. But you will have gone through like talking about your deepest traumas with your best friend, and that should be okay. Just as it's okay to talk about your deepest traumas with only your therapist and not with your friends. You don't need to go into all of that with your friends and family and the people that you know. But I think that it's important to know that everybody has an individual experience of therapy. And just because you went through therapy and said these things to your therapist does not mean that somebody else will talk about the same things with their therapist. I see it quite often in people being like, why are you trauma dumping on your best friend? Or, why are you so repressed around your best friend or something? And a relationship with a therapist is just that. It's the relationship with the therapist, and it doesn't need to be coupled to any of the other relationships. It can be, but it's different for every person. And so for me, I can tell certain things to certain therapists, but like, for example, I don't need to come out to my therapist because I don't find it relevant to a certain thing that I am struggling with. But sometimes I will, sometimes I won't. I've had bad experiences with therapists. And telling somebody to keep pushing through with that therapist because it's the only option that you have can be hurtful. It can actually be harmful to go to a therapist that you don't click with or you don't trust, or that is saying certain things to you that you don't really agree with. And it's okay to say, no, I don't want to keep going to this person, I'm going to change. And sometimes those changes take a long time. Sometimes it takes months before you manage to get on the waiting list to, well, first it takes you weeks before you get onto a waiting list, and then the waiting list is several months long. And what do you say to all these people who are on the waiting list? Are they not trying to grow and become better persons during that time that they're waiting to get to a therapist? You can't expect every person who is having trouble to be in therapy. I understand that there are people who have been harmed by so-called narcissistic people, people who have been abusive to them, people who have been toxic to them. But I don't know. Would they have been better if they decided to go to a therapist? Maybe not, you know. Maybe they wouldn't have been able to go through with therapy. Maybe they wouldn't have been able to find a therapist that clicks. Maybe they'll never be ready for therapy. But it's not always that person who is to blame, you know. Sometimes the situation just is difficult. It's difficult in this world to find a therapist. There's an increasing need for psychologists and therapists because people have started to realize that they need this mental health help. Our mental health is at its worst at the moment. And there aren't a huge number of psychologists and therapists around. So there's going to be waiting lists. There's going to be difficulties in getting the help that you need. But I think that we shouldn't be expecting our friends and family members to go to therapy. You can set boundaries of being like, you know, I think that you should go to therapy. Let's say that this conversation is out of bounds until you have found another perspective on this thing, or let's try to have less contact until we can discuss these things with a level mind. You know, there are ways to set boundaries, but the boundary should not be, you must be in therapy. And I've been in that situation where a friend has basically told me that we cannot stay in this relationship if you are not going to therapy. And that in itself was not great, you know, because I went to therapy because of this person and not because I truly wanted to change. Or not, well, I wanted to develop and grow and such, but it wasn't because I felt ready to do the therapy for myself. I was doing it because I was scared of being rejected by this other person. And that's not a good reason to go to therapy. A reason to go to therapy is because you value yourself and your own life, and you want to keep pushing forward. And that is not selfish. That is the whole point of therapy, is the self-development. So of course you need to focus on yourself in this context. I think it's also important to not place the expectation that people are always going to be going upwards in the recovery, because there is always relapses and the curve goes up and down, you know, and it's not going to always be better. Sometimes it will get worse, and sometimes it will be shit, you know, and it will go up and down. There is an exception to this rule though, which is if a person is in emergency situation. By emergency situation, I mean suicidal plans. Now, I know that people aren't trained in this kind of thing, but I actually did, I just did a 2-hour digital course about suicide, and I also have worked in psychiatry for a few months. So I'm not like a mental health professional per se. I have seen the sort of things that professionals look for when they're trying to assess if somebody is suicidal or not, if somebody is in danger or not. And what people are looking for is like, there is kind of a progression. First you feel hopeless usually, and then you start seeing like the future is dark, or you feel like life is meaningless, and then you might get into wanting to disappear, wanting to not be there, wanting to be dead, and then you get to suicidal thoughts, which are more like thinking about how, like, killing yourself. And then you get to the suicide plans, which is you figured out the how, and you figured out the when, and you figured out the, you know, sometimes you figured out even the time you're going to do it. And sometimes people have started doing preparations at this stage to like write notes to their family, or putting their finances in order and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes along the way there might be self-harm involved, sometimes not, and sometimes at the end of that route there is suicidal tries, like trying to kill yourself, and then if that attempt is successful, then you've committed suicide. But I've never been, like, I have been at the suicidal plans when I was a teenager, and it's at that point where the therapists, psychologists, the doctors, that's when they think, oh, this isn't a real danger, we need to send you to the hospital. And I understand that it would be scary to tell your therapist or psychologist about this. I think that it's okay to discuss your suicidal ideation, like you're thinking about, oh, wouldn't it be nice to do a certain thing? I won't get graphic with you guys. Or say that you've tried this, and just say, well, I've thought these things, but it's not actually something that I would do, at least not in the near future. But once you get to a certain point where it's like, I'm going to, you know, jump off a bridge at this time next week, then it's like, the professionals have an obligation to make sure that you're safe make sure that you are feeling in an okay place so that you don't take your life. But so I find that people are very, very scared of talking about suicide, and I understand that because I also find it very, very scary to talk about with people and by therapists and such. And I can see sometimes that people don't really understand if I don't explain exactly what I mean when I'm thinking about my own suicidal ideation. Sometimes I feel like I would like to die, but I know that I will never do such a thing. I will never do anything about those thoughts. But it's hard for other people to imagine that. Some people think that just because I've had those thoughts and I have them quite regularly, that it means that I'm in danger of killing myself soon, and that scares people off, and then they don't want to have anything to do with me, and they think that I'm being selfish and blah blah blah. Anyway, but that's because they don't really know about this whole process and they're not willing to listen. What is important is being willing to just sit back and listen and be supportive. But once it starts coming into a certain line of like, this is not good, we need to actually do something before you kill yourself, then it's time to call 911 or drive this person to the hospital, or contact their therapist, or that's when you should be hands-on and like kind of force the person along. But before that, if the person is suicidal but doesn't have any plans of doing anything, then the most important thing is just to sit there and listen and be a friend for this person, and not be offering advice and things. Sometimes it can be useful if you tell your friend like, oh, I can help you with doing the dishes if it's too much, or just be there for them, but telling them that, oh, they must go see a therapist, don't you think that person has thought about that? The process of getting to therapy is extremely difficult in most cases, especially if you're somebody who is mentally ill from the start, because there are a lot of phone calls to make, which a lot of people don't like to do. There are a lot of appointments that are extremely scary because you're with somebody who you don't trust. And also there's all of the undigging work, which takes a lot of energy. So you can't blame people who have low mental health with struggling to get to therapy. Sometimes that's just how it is. And somebody's experience of therapy, I've already said this before, might be completely different to yours. And that doesn't mean that you have somehow failed at therapy or that you are successful at therapy. Some people get a therapy time very quickly, and then they're like, why can't you get a time at therapy? I got my time at therapy within a month and started treatment within a month. And then somebody else is like, oh, well, I've waited like 3 months and we haven't really figured out what kind of treatment would be, like what kind of therapy would be good for me yet, but it will come, everybody's path is different. I do have to mention INFJ friend because my ex-INFJ friend is the fact that he was a lovely person, well, he is a lovely person, and what he got right in all this is that he said that every path is different and that nobody can go the same path as you, and you can't judge somebody else's path, and each path takes different times for different things, and nobody can join you on that path. And so therefore, nobody can judge you for it. And also, nobody can hold your hand along it, even a therapist, you know. But your therapist can be along on the sidelines and like give you tools, like they can send you tools on your path. They're like, here's a tool, and then you're like, oh, okay, that's helpful, you know. But they can't be there always for you and holding your hand. And your friends can't either, you know, they can't hold your hand, but they can also be there from the sidelines and be like, yeah, go you know, like cheerleading you and all that. So I want to say that within therapy there is also a relapse, and sometimes the therapy will actively make you feel worse. I had to do the exposure therapy for social anxiety, and I basically lost a friendship because of that. And I had basically a very terrible panic attack, and it scared my friend away, and it confirmed my thought that doing this certain thing was bad for me socially, and therefore I kind of retreated after a while, you know, and didn't want to do any of the exposure therapy stuff, at least not around this person. And it was hard because it was like reinforcing my fears rather than making things better. But sometimes that's how it is. So I think that, yes, it is good for people to go to therapy. I recommend therapy to anybody, basically, because we all have our issues. But I know it isn't easy getting to therapy. I know it's therapy isn't always good, depending on what kind of treatment you are using and what kind of therapist you have, and also your circumstances of life right at that point. And it's not a magical solution for everything. I do think that therapy has helped me tremendously through a lot of things, and I am much better, a much more mature person since this year of therapy. But I wouldn't have been able to do it without the support of my friends and family and co-workers and the people that I know. And they are just as important as that therapy. And if they had decided to withdraw their love from me because I had decided not to go to therapy, then I would, first of all, I would be friendless, and also I would be so much worse off, and I would feel very lonely, and I maybe would have spiraled downwards in my feelings, despite everything that I would have been doing in therapy with my therapist. So that was kind of my thoughts for today. I made a video about this before, but I think I went a little bit too graphic, and I don't want to trigger anybody. I will put in the description just a trigger warning, but like I think that the name of this video will probably be warning enough. I understand that it's hard to think about these things when you are feeling like terrible. I feel that I'm at some of my best periods right now, where I don't even need medication to function, and I can live without the therapy as well, because I'm in such a good place. But I know that I will at some point not do so well, and so it's good to the fact that I have a therapist at the moment. I don't want to my therapist is like, yeah, you don't need me anymore, basically. Or he like asked me like, do you still need this? And I'm like, yes. But at a certain point I'll be like, no, I don't need this anymore either. There isn't really a manual of how long a therapy should go on. So maybe you just need to go there for a few weeks, or maybe you need to go there for years. There isn't really a manual of how long and what therapy would be best for you. Everything is so individual. So yeah, have a great day, everybody.